This channel is a home to my geeky interests. Now that mostly covers Yu-Gi-Oh! And wrestling, action figures, and a little bit of die-cast cars and stuff like that sprinkled in and around it. It would also be a home to my other tabletop interests, except over the years, I've kind of lost them all. Welcome to the video, guys. Today I'm going to be talking about Cardfight Vanguard, how I used to play it, and why I stopped. So I started playing Vanguard around 2014 when my brother realized that he wasn't too cool for card games and being geeky in general, and decided he wanted to start playing them. After spending his teenage years disavowing it and probably trading off our Metal Raiders, Gate Guardian, and selling all of his Yu-Gi-Oh stuff to me and so on and so forth. When we were kids, we mostly played Yu-Gi-Oh! And a little bit of Pokemon, and I don't think there was ever plans for him to really get back into Yu-Gi-Oh! Although he did play a little bit, but I think the main plan was to get into Pokemon and to give a go to Cardfight Vanguard. Now, at the time, I wasn't that interested. I really wasn't that bothered about trying Vanguard out. But I think out of politeness, I gave it a go with him. And as it turns out, I quite enjoyed it. He bought a Narukami trial deck, and my friend John put me in contact with a guy who had a Grand Blue deck. So I bought that off him. It was fully built Deadly Swordmaster Limit Break. And we played those decks against each other. I played a little bit with my friend Tom and other people at locals, some of my other friends and stuff. Because all my friends were into Vanguard, I just never really had the interest. The main deck I was interested in at the start didn't come out for a while, but we'll come back to that point. Honestly, my brother's interest in the game kind of fell off quite quickly. I don't really know why, but I guess he just wasn't that bothered, or other things took his interest. But I got into it a bit, and when our locals went from being the local library to being a local shop, there became a big change in Vanguard from me. I started playing it a lot more. I did start competing in a couple of the local tournaments. Now, I don't think I ever took that Grand Blue deck into the local tournaments, but I think by that point I'd probably start putting Aquaforce together, which is the deck I wanted to play in the first place because otters. Actually, I think I did play that deck in tournaments. I think I changed it up in the end. I didn't really like the fact that it basically ran Deadly Swordmaster and Spirit Exceed, and I didn't like the fact that you basically never saw the pieces to ride either of them a turn early. So I think I dropped down Spirit Exceed, or maybe even took him out the deck altogether. I only kept Deadly Swordmaster because I thought it looked cool. But yeah, I definitely changed that deck up a bit. We'll be able to see how one day. I remember one time I wanted to play this unit, I think it was called Negromal or something like that, and I wanted to play it because it was the only thing I had that could resurrect units. My man John didn't want me to play it because it only had 8k power, and Gobi was like, nah, just do what you want to do. And then took the Grand Blue deck, put it in, played it against someone, and he just called me over and he's like, what the fuck, this deck's so much fun. And I was like, I don't know, I didn't make it. I've done little tweaks to it, but I didn't make it. Aquaforce didn't come out for a while in English, so by the time it did, I'd kind of forgotten about the whole thing, and by the time my brother was bringing it up, I wasn't really interested anymore. So I think that's probably the case. I'd probably started scraping together an Aquaforce deck by that point. And that's basically what I enjoyed most about the game, was that people just didn't care about their bulk. So if they had stuff for your clan that was worth nothing, it was yours. And that was a really cool factor of the game, you know, a new mechanic would come out, someone would buy loads of the set, and I'd just innocently turn up to locals, and someone would hand me the cheap stuff. And that's how it was pretty cool. So Legion came out, I turned up, someone gave me the new Legion and his Legion mate, and you were caught up. And those early tournaments were the good old days. They were the tournaments that I actually enjoyed. It didn't really become much of a competition. There weren't really other phases of tournament play or even or whatever that I did enjoy. And when I talk about tournaments, I mean like our locals tournaments were really casual. I mean, most times you were probably lucky to get 8 players. At the absolute maximum, there was probably like 12, maybe 16 at a push. But yeah, they were really small. They were casual. It was just an excuse to get prize support while playing with your mates, basically. And those early tournaments, it didn't really matter what happened, but I was still able to kind of beat the players that I kind of was just better at games than. I kind of just had more of a knowledge of like how to play games and stuff like that. And you still could pretend that you were playing against the people with fully built decks who knew what they were doing and everything. You get to pretend that you're playing too. When you give the kid the controller that's not plugged in, it's, you know, you get to pretend that you're joining in. And it was really good. And to be honest, it was fun to be able to turn up, not really care. And you did actually get a couple of wins. You didn't come last. So it was pretty, you know, it was all right. Those were the good old days. Like I said, it was all right. It was pretty good. It was fine. At the time I was playing Vanguard, it was still very much RNG based, and you could theoretically beat anything with anything. Now, I'm not naive, I'm not going to pretend that you actually could do that to any real degree, but let's say like a fully built deck has like 90% chance of beating the stuff you've scraped together from locals. Let's say you've got a 10% chance of hitting all your triggers, they miss all of theirs, and so on and so forth. Let's say something like that. It is entirely possible. And the fact that it was, or the fact that the game would still be close, you could still pretend you had a horse in the race until you lost, was what was kind of engaging about the game, what was kind of interesting. And you could just play with people that were at different stages of the game with whatever you had. It was really cool. So where did this start falling apart? Stride units. Stride units definitely precipitated the end of the game for me. Now, I didn't look at them from a cynical point of view. I didn't look at them and go, whoa, these are really stupidly overpowered. Why have they put these in the game? It wasn't anything like that. I quite liked the idea of strides, except for some aspects of them. But one thing that didn't work for me was that all of a sudden, decks were so expensive. As well as your deck, you now needed to have stride units, and you had to have them units. And people weren't as giving with the stride units for your clan as they had been with other units, but you had to have them. And even if you had them, if you didn't have the best ones, you would lose to a deck that did. And unfortunately, at that point, what I liked about Vanguard was the fact that you could win with anything, theoretically, and it was so cheap. You could play it on the cheap. You could play it for free if people were willing to engage you. And I just never felt like I got to a point where it justified the money out of me, and all of a sudden it was demanding a lot of money. And I can't believe I nearly forgot to mention what is probably my least favorite thing Bushy Road have ever done. And that is basically, as a cheapskate who also had no money at the time, I was definitely not spending, like 30 odd pounds to buy a copy of a card of a stride unit, just so that when I play my other £30 copy of it, I turn this one face up to activate its ability. That is, to this day, one of the most staggeringly, unfathomably cash-grabby things I've ever seen in my life. It's literally pointless. At a certain point, proxying is allowed. Proxy the second copy, don't spend the money. That was absolutely baffling to me back then, and it still is to this day. And there are very few things on this earth that I would want to spend money on less than something I'm technically not even using. Like, I can't even put into words how much I hate that. So suddenly you can't play with your friends anymore because they've got fully built up stride decks, and you've got like 4 of the Aquaforce trial deck unit or something like that. Now, that isn't to say that I blame anyone for that. That's my decision. I didn't want to spend the money. That's the fact. Other friends of mine have been playing the game for a very long time at that point. They loved the game a lot more than me, and they played fewer games than I did. So the money was very much justified from their point of view, and I don't exactly blame anyone. And I also don't exactly blame a card game company for making something that makes money, that sells their product. That's just the way it is. I didn't like it, but it's the way things are. It's the way games work. So it's not really anybody's fault, except mine. And that was my decision, I didn't really have a lot of money at that time, and I played quite a few games and other games that I wanted to spend more money on than Vanguard, and I never felt like Vanguard justified the money that it was demanding. So all of a sudden we went from a point where you could sort of play with your friends and pretend you had a horse in the race. Suddenly you just got smashed by your friends, and it wasn't that much fun. So my big Hail Mary was going back to Grand Blue. A friend of mine, Wingy, bought loads of Rummy Labyrinth, got loads of really cool pulls, and mixed together a Grand Blue deck, played it for a bit, decided he didn't like it, and offered it to me for around 50 quid, I think. Now, it was a very disjointed deck, because it was very much scrapings. It wasn't like it had been pulled, like singles pulled together, but there was some really good stuff in it. And I added some more stuff to it. At one point, I tried to play it with like ghosties instead, which really interested me. Because ghosties I absolutely loved. Who doesn't love ghosties? So the fact that they then had a deck sort of pulled me in a little bit more. Maybe drew out how long the life of this Grand Blue deck was. However, having spent what to me at the time was a good deal of money, I appreciate it's not a large amount of money for a deck at that time, but to me it was a large amount of money. And ultimately, things hadn't really changed. I would still beat people who I was better at the game than and lose to everybody else. And it didn't matter what deck they were playing. If they had fully invested in their deck, they'd beat me. And that's just the way it was. My deck had some really good stuff in it. It just didn't have the proper top-end Grand Blue strides, or units for that matter. It had like disjointed perfect guards and stuff like that. It wasn't fully built. And it wanted more money to finish the deck, and then it would have wanted a lot more money to sort the strides out. And the fact of the matter is, I didn't want to cough the money up, because I had already invested a large amount of money to me, and it made no difference. Not a jot of difference. I might as well have stuck with my Aquaforce deck with 4 stride units in it. I might as well have stuck with the Thavas deck that I had, buying the Aquaforce stride trial deck and upgrading that a bit. I might as well have stuck with the Blue Storm Vanguard deck, which I think I actually made a while later, mostly because I already had a lot of Blue Storm stuff, because that was my era. And some of the strides and other units were pretty cheap. So I think I scraped that together a bit later on, and it never really saw that much action. But basically, I had put all my eggs in this Grand Blue basket, and it made no difference. But it wasn't just my deck that was a problem. I suddenly realized, I looked around me, and I realized I didn't enjoy playing against any of them, because there were so many control-based elements brought into the game at this point. Obviously, things like Mega Colony were always supposed to do that, but now Mega Colony did multiple things, and there were multiple decks and multiple ways to mess you about. But then the control effects came into other things as well. There was even control elements in that Blue Storm deck. I remember there being a unit, I think it was a trigger unit even, that when it boosts your Vanguard, I think it was only like 3k power or something, but when it boosts your Vanguard, your opponent can't call grade zeros. That's still a control effect. And there was stuff like that in like every single deck. And that's when I realized I hate control decks. And this was no longer a game with control decks in it. It was a control game. And I didn't really appreciate that either. And that was probably exacerbated by similar sort of things in HeroClix, which was my main game at the time. There was a lot of control-based meta elements in that. And in both games, you would turn up to a tournament, and it didn't matter what you were up against, you didn't enjoy what you were playing against. And a friend of mine, Anth, who used to play HeroClix, once said that he felt like he was the only person that just enjoyed playing the game, and everybody else only enjoyed it when they won. And I said to him, it's not that I only enjoy winning, it's that I don't enjoy losing anymore. And Vanguard was very much the same thing. It's not that you weren't allowed to win, it's not that I had to win every game, it's that losing was miserable. It was a miserable experience where you can't do anything with your deck. You can't guard enough to stop their strides. You can't hit them back hard enough on your turn to really make a difference. It just wasn't much fun. And again, I completely own that it was my decision to not spend the money. Not that I necessarily had the money, but it was my decision not to spend the money. So this Grand Blue deck had a little bit of a run out. At the same time where I was having a bit of trouble playing in the HeroClix tournaments as well. I was sort of alternating week on week and not really having that much fun in either. And ultimately, in the end, it came down to one aspect of my personality, which I have always been very conscious of, or at least I've been very conscious of for a number of years. And that is that I have the kind of anxiety that makes me think people don't like me. And it makes me think people aren't interested in what I'm talking about and stuff like that. Which is ironic when I've got a YouTube channel and people frequently click on it and say, oh, this is when he stops talking about whatever. Which funnily enough, that doesn't bother me at all. Like, just go away. All right, if you're not interested, leave the video. And there was always evidence of this. The reason why it was such a strong aspect of my personality is that there was always evidence of this. Throughout my life, there have been people who silently decide that they aren't really that interested in being around me anymore. They might start phasing me out or making like sly comments or jokes or something, or they might even be a bit more direct about it and make leave the group chat or whatever, like literally just making it very obvious they've had enough of me. It's something I'm very aware of. It's something I very much try and avoid now because I must have a grating personality. I don't really know what it is, but I try and avoid when I notice something is a little bit off or the reaction to something's a little bit off, I try and avoid it. And suddenly I was playing every game of Vanguard and I was annoyed all the time. Sometimes even if I won, I was complaining about this, I was complaining about that, I was complaining about cost, I was complaining about control, I was complaining about this, I was complaining about that. I didn't complain about anyone specifically, and I don't think I complained about anything like in the game that like I don't think I was ever like, oh, this should be banned, this is too good, anything like that. I think I appreciated the game for what it was, but I appreciate that the game wasn't me. And of course, at that point, I could see friends around me on the same table weren't looking up anymore when I was complaining. You know, they weren't acknowledging what I was saying. They weren't agreeing with me or disagreeing with me. They weren't arguing with me anymore. Ultimately, the introspection led to me going, people are getting sick of hearing me listen to this. People care about this game a lot more than I do. People love this game. And people enjoy this game. Everyone else still enjoys this game. I stopped playing so that I didn't ruin the game for those people. I didn't enjoy playing the game. I definitely had that kind of Stockholm syndrome. I don't think I was quite ready to quit yet. Like, I don't think I was like, right, you know what, I've had enough of this game, I'm not playing anymore. It was more of a conscious decision that other people were getting annoyed about it, and I didn't want that. I didn't want them to be annoyed about it, but I also didn't want it to ruin the experience for them. I didn't want them to be like, oh, I want to play some Vanguard this weekend, but I don't want that guy complaining about it. And I like to think that that has been well appreciated by the people that are aware of it. Mainly it was my friends Tom, the Guardian Circle, and Steve-O. Steve-O ironically doesn't play the game anymore, but Guardian Circle obviously still loves the game, has played it all the way through, and as you know, still finds a good deal of enjoyment in it. And I like to think that he appreciates me ducking out when I did, because I know that there have been other things that I've done over the years that have pissed him off. So I'm glad this wasn't like an extra one of them. Obviously, it'll have bothered him at the time, but in the great scheme of things, it'll have been more appreciative that I gave up and bowed out when I did. Steve-O left during the first reboot. At some point, I don't know exactly. Maybe he made it to the end of it and just thought, you know what, I'm not doing this again. I can't really remember. But the funny thing about the first reboot is that everyone at my locals seemed to be complaining about it all the time. Everyone seemed to be salty in every single game. And the only person who was like enjoying it was also the person who tended to win every tournament, which was the Guardian Circle again. So I was then on the outside watching this thinking, well, I'm glad at least I'm not ruining it for him, because this looks miserable. Like, everybody's complaining, everybody's shouting at each other, having a go at each other and everything, complaining about this unit, that deck, and so on and so forth, and this person. And I was just on the outside kind of like, bet that's fun. Oh my god, how did I initially almost forget to talk about this? There is another reason why I stopped playing the game, and that is during the time when I was playing this Grand Blue deck, with or without ghosties. I always had a bit of ghosties, sometimes I had more ghosties. And when I was playing this deck, a lot of the time, the main thing it could do was call Mick the Ghosty from Drop Zone, build a load of power, and whack some stuff. That was like the only thing that I could rely on in the deck that to make a good move. Like, that was the only thing that could definitely swing, and like, you know you can rely on it. I think I only had one copy of Mick originally. I might have found a second one. I might maybe eventually bridged out to 4. I don't really remember. But the only thing that I remember is that it was the only card in my deck that felt like it was anywhere near on the level of some of the stuff that other people had. And then they put it to 1. A Vanguard ban list. And I was like, fuck this shit, I'm out. It was a bit ridiculous to me. I didn't have any idea what kind of combos you could do with it on the biggest stage with top-end Grand Blue decks or anything like that. I didn't know what kind of combos or daft stuff you could do with it. I just knew that this was like my only good card. My only card that I was like, yeah, this I know. I'm going to call 2 rear guards. I'm going to get Mick. It's going to be good. But this was already after I had made the decision to stop playing. And if anything, it was kind of an excuse. It was kind of like a jokey way out to just be like, oh, I'm not playing it without this. That's ridiculous. I'm not doing it, you know. Whereas actually, I mean, it was a bit ridiculous from my point of view. Again, I still don't know to this day what people did with it or anything. But Yeah, from my point of view, that was one of the only cards I had, and suddenly it wasn't very good. And I know what you're thinking. If you're nothing without the card, then you shouldn't have the card. So I guess I thought, yeah, I won't have any of them then. At very best, it was the straw that broke the camel's back. But realistically, I think I'd already made my decision by that point. And it just gave me a way of saving face rather than being all dramatic. Like, guys, I'm not going to play the game anymore because I don't want to enjoy it. I don't want to ruin it for everyone. I can just say, I'm not playing without Mick. And there you go. So basically, I let the game go. I stopped bringing it. I stopped turning up. And eventually, I put the Grand Blue deck on eBay. Didn't get the full money that I'd spent on it back. That's not always the case. But I also didn't sell all of it. I sold what I wanted to get rid of it. I kept some of it. If I'd sold some of the strides as singles, I probably would have made more money. But it doesn't really matter. The fact of the matter is I just wanted to cash out on it at that point. My other decks that I mentioned, the Blue Storm Aquaforce deck, I still have. And the other Aquaforce deck I mentioned, well, one fateful day, possibly before even all of this happened, I can't remember exactly. One fateful day, I bought 2 cans of Pepsi from locals because it was cheaper than buying one. And I only drank one of them. And you can do the rest of the maths yourself. In many ways, although that was an agonizingly damaging situation and I lost a lot of money's worth of stuff there, in the end, with that incident, I looked at what I'd lost versus what I still had, what had survived, and I kind of had to just take it as a win. And we actually made a list of everything that got damaged in my disjointed Thavas Aquaforce deck that never really had like coherent units in it or anything like that. We made a list of like what it was so that I could like try and get the stuff back. And I think we started making efforts to get the stuff back. But one thing I quickly found with doing stuff like that is that even though you can replace the stuff, you can't really take the pain away. As dramatic as that sounds. You start putting it back together and you're just constantly thinking about what happened because of a can you shouldn't have put in your bag. And it's difficult. And a friend of mine gave me full Shiranui because it was one of my Yu-Gi-Oh decks that got ruined. He gave me the full deck because it wasn't really worth much. And I played it once and I was like, I can't do this. Like, it's just, I hate this. This is just making me sad. But that could also have been because Link format just came out and the deck was dead, and so were all of my decks, and that's why I stopped playing Yu-Gi-Oh! For about 2 years. So that deck went the journey, unfortunately. Although I do still have the damaged cards somewhere. And the Grand Blue deck that I mentioned at the start, my very first deck that I bought off a friend of a friend, cheapski, started off the whole thing. That deck, I still have somewhere. I was kind of tempted by the reboots because of just how cheap the trial decks were. I was kind of tempted to give it a go. But even from the first reboot, you looked at it and you just said, well, I know exactly where this ends. And the second reboot confirmed that. I did kind of show some interest in Overdress because I saw an Overtrigger that I really liked, and I quite liked the look of Zolga, or Zolga? But I priced it up and it would have cost me like £50 at the time for the Zolgas and the Overtrigger. And I was like, yeah, nah. The whole appeal of these things is that the trial decks are like £3.50 or something daft. So, no. What was really interesting about Overdress is that when they mixed all the clans together, they mixed all my favourite clans into one. You know, Aquaforce, Grand Blue, Great Nature, they were all in Stoichea. That was great. But... And more recently, I have been tempted to get the... Is it called a Master Deck set? The Night Rose Master Deck set? Just for old time's sake more than anything. And if I did want to crack it out and play a game or something, then fair enough, I would have it for that. Or otherwise, I'd just have it for collective purposes, add it to the horde. But I don't think I ever would play it, And I don't know if I want to spend the money on it for old time's sake kind of thing. The fact of the matter is, if Steve-O still played, then maybe I could see it. Steve-O's not bothered anymore, so that means I've only got Tom to play it with, really. And he's got plenty of people to play it with without having to play against the same Night Rose deck, only to realise I still hate the game. And I look at the cards from the outside looking in now, and there is so much text on them, and it's like, oh, wow, this looks like staggering to get into at this point. Like, it feels like Overdress has gone to a point where, like, it's far enough into its life cycle that it would be difficult to start now, if you get me. Where are we now? I'm a hoarder, I'm a collector, I struggle to get rid of things. So it's not like I don't have any of my Vanguard stuff left. Now, even before I decided to do this video, I planned to do a different Vanguard video called What Remains of My Vanguard Collection. And that I will still release at some point. So if you're watching this well into the future, that should be available in the end screen. And if you're watching this immediately after it's come out or shortly after it's come out, that video should be out at some point, but I couldn't give you a time frame. Well, one thing I can tell you is that that will be the only other Vanguard video on this channel, unless something crazy happens. But either way, if you'd like to check out some other tabletop videos, we will have the DSW tabletop playlist in the end screen as well. And if you want to check anything out on that, I really would appreciate it. Like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed this story. And I really do appreciate you guys joining me. So thank you all for watching, and goodbye. Let's see if with 30 straight minutes of raw footage I remembered everything I wanted to say in this one, or whether I'll be randomly changing clothes and lighting and stuff throughout the video to interject things here and there. Which I've already done.